May 15, 1945, Camp Shanks, New York. The morning sun cast long shadows across the prisoner of war compound as dozens of German women, recently captured auxiliary personnel from the crumbling defense lines, stood in confused clusters behind the wire fencing. Lieutenant Sarah Thompson of the Women's Army Corps watched through the administrative building window as these women stared in bewilderment at the African-American guards patrolling their section. What these German prisoners believed about the world was about to collide with a reality so different from their indoctrination that it would fundamentally transform their understanding of humanity itself. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. In the coming days, these women would attempt something so shocking that it would become whispered legend among military personnel for decades. They would literally try to rub what they believed was black paint off the skin of their American guards, convinced that no human being could naturally possess such dark skin. This is the story of how direct human contact dismantled years of propaganda in ways that no political speech ever could. The transport ship USS General Meigs had docked at New York Harbor 3 days earlier, carrying its unusual cargo of 237 German female prisoners of war. These were not ordinary captives. Among them were radio operators from the German Communications Corps, administrative staff from military installations, and even a handful of female pilots who had served in non-combat roles. They represented a cross-section of German society that had been completely immersed in the racial ideology of their regime for over a decade. Captain Robert Hayes, the commanding officer of Camp Shanks's prisoner processing center, had dealt with thousands of German male prisoners throughout the war, but these women presented unique challenges. The camp's standard protocols had been designed for male prisoners, and the addition of female captives required entirely new procedures, housing arrangements, and supervision protocols. "I've been running this operation for 2 years," Hayes confided to Lieutenant Thompson during their morning briefing, "but I've never seen anything quite like the looks on these women's faces when they first saw Sergeant Washington and his men." Sergeant First Class Marcus Washington commanded a squad of 12 African-American military policemen who had been assigned to guard duty at the female prisoner compound. Washington, a veteran of the Italian campaign, had seen his share of German prisoners, but working with female captives was new territory for everyone involved. His men included Corporal James Butler from Detroit, Private First Class Robert King from Chicago, and Private Tommy Williams from rural Alabama, each bringing their own experiences with American racial attitudes to this unprecedented situation. The initial processing had proceeded routinely enough. The German women had been photographed, fingerprinted, and assigned identification numbers according to standard prisoner of war protocols. They had received clean clothing, medical examinations, and basic orientation about camp rules and regulations. But it was during the first meal service that the truly extraordinary encounters began to unfold. Greta Hoffmann, a 24-year-old communications specialist from Munich, had served at a radar station outside Berlin until the final weeks of the conflict. She possessed a technical education that was unusual for women of her generation, having studied mathematics and physics before the conflict began. Her worldview had been shaped by 12 years of systematic indoctrination about racial hierarchy and the supposed scientific basis for German superiority. As Sergeant Washington approached the mess hall tables to ensure proper order during the meal service, Hoffmann stared at him with an expression of complete bewilderment. She turned to her tablemate, Anna Müller, a former administrative clerk from Hamburg, and whispered urgently in German. "Anna, look at that soldier," Hoffmann said, her voice carrying a mixture of confusion and genuine curiosity. "How do they get the black color so uniform? It must be some kind of military camouflage, but I cannot see any brush marks or uneven areas." Muller, who had worked in supply logistics and considered herself worldly, nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps it is a new kind of chemical treatment for night operations, very sophisticated, but why would they use it during daylight hours?" Their conversation was overheard by Corporal Butler, whose grandmother had taught him basic German during his childhood in Detroit's German-American community. He found himself in the surreal position of listening to educated women discuss his skin color as if it were a military technology. Dr. Elizabeth Weber, A former medical assistant from Frankfurt who served as the informal leader among the German women, decided to investigate this puzzling phenomenon more systematically. Weber had studied biology before the conflict and prided herself on her scientific approach to problems. That evening, she gathered a small group of the most educated women to discuss their observations. "I have examined the American soldiers carefully," Weber announced to her circle of listeners in the women's barracks. "The coloration is completely uniform, extending to areas that would be impossible to reach with paint or dye. Yet we know from our scientific education that human skin pigmentation cannot naturally achieve such darkness. There must be some explanation that we are not seeing." Maria Schneider, a former radio operator from Berlin, offered her own theory. "Perhaps it is a medical condition caused by exposure to certain chemicals. I noticed that they handle their equipment very naturally, so it cannot be uncomfortable or temporary." These discussions continued for several days, with the German women developing increasingly elaborate theories to explain what they were observing. Some suggested that the dark skin might be the result of intensive sun exposure during tropical campaigns. Others theorized about chemical treatments or even surgical modifications designed to help soldiers blend into night environments. Meanwhile, the African American guards were becoming aware of the intense scrutiny they were receiving. Private Williams, who had grown up in rural Alabama and was accustomed to hostile stares, found this particular form of attention completely different from anything he had experienced. "Sergeant," Williams reported to Washington during their evening briefing, "those German ladies keep staring at us like we're some kind of museum exhibit. It's not hostile staring, mind you. More like they're trying to figure out how a clock works." Washington nodded thoughtfully. He had noticed the same phenomenon and had been discussing it with Lieutenant Thompson. "I think we might be the first black people some of these women have ever seen in person. From what I understand about Germany, there weren't many of us over there before the conflict." The situation took a dramatic turn on May 19th during the routine distribution of toiletries and personal hygiene items. Dr. Weber had volunteered to help distribute soap and towels to her fellow prisoners, viewing it as an opportunity to observe the American guards more closely. When Corporal Butler handed her a bar of soap, she stared at it intensely, then looked at his hands with obvious fascination. "Excuse me," Weber said in carefully pronounced English, "may I ask you about your skin?" Butler, caught off guard by the directness of the question, glanced around to see if any of his fellow guards were listening. "What do you want to know, ma'am?" Weber held up the bar of soap and made a scrubbing motion with her hands. "Does this remove the black color? Is it permanent or temporary treatment?" The question was asked with such genuine scientific curiosity that Butler found himself momentarily speechless. Here was an educated woman, presumably intelligent enough to serve in the German military, asking him if soap could wash away his race. "Ma'am," Butler replied slowly, "this is just how I was born. This is my natural skin color." Weber looked skeptical. "But that is not possible. Human beings do not have such dark pigmentation naturally. We learned this in our biological studies." Butler realized he was facing something far more complex than simple racism. This was a collision between indoctrinated belief and observable reality. "Would you like me to explain how human skin color actually works?" What happened next would become legendary among the camp personnel. Weber, driven by genuine scientific curiosity, accepted Butler's offer to explain human genetics and skin pigmentation. Word spread quickly among the German women, and soon a small crowd had gathered around Butler as he attempted to provide a basic lesson in biology and human diversity. Using simple diagrams drawn in the dirt, Butler explained how melanin production varied among different human populations based on geographical origins and evolutionary adaptations. He described how people from regions with intense sunlight had evolved darker skin as protection against ultraviolet radiation, while people from northern climates had developed lighter skin to maximize vitamin synthesis in lower light environments. The German women listened with intense concentration, occasionally interrupting with questions that revealed the depth of their previous miseducation. Dr. Weber took notes on scraps of paper, treating the impromptu lesson as a scientific lecture. "But if this is natural," asked Maria Schneider, "why were we taught that such variation was impossible?" Butler paused, recognizing that he was venturing into sensitive political territory. Maybe you were taught wrong about some things. This simple statement hung in the air like a revelation. If they had been taught incorrectly about something as observable as human skin color, what other aspects of their education might have been false? The breakthrough moment came 3 days later when Dr. Weber approached Butler with an unusual request. "Corporal Butler, I would like to conduct an experiment. With your permission, I would like to determine if your skin color can be removed by washing." Butler stared at her in amazement. "You want to try to wash the black off me?" Weber nodded earnestly. "For scientific purposes only. I believe you when you say it is natural, but I must verify this with direct observation." Butler found himself in an unprecedented situation. Here was a German prisoner of war, asking permission to scrub his skin to test whether his race was permanent. After consulting with Sergeant Washington, who found the request as bizarre as it was historically significant, Butler agreed to the experiment. The test took place in the camp's medical facility, under the supervision of the American medical staff and Lieutenant Thompson. Dr. Weber was provided with various soaps, scrubbing brushes, and even mild chemical solutions used for cleaning equipment. For 30 minutes, she methodically attempted to remove Butler's skin pigmentation while taking careful notes about her observations. "The coloration remains completely uniform," Weber muttered to herself as she worked. "No fading, no streaking, no evidence of surface application." She paused and looked up at Butler with an expression of genuine wonder. "Corporal Butler, you were telling the truth. This is truly your natural appearance." The implications of this discovery rippled through the female prisoner population like an earthquake. If the Americans had been correct about human skin pigmentation, what other beliefs that they had held as scientific fact might be equally false? Anna Mueller, who had initially theorized about military camouflage, sought out Private Williams to ask about his background. "Private Williams, if you do not mind my asking, what was your occupation before the military?" Williams, still adjusting to being treated as a source of information rather than an object of curiosity, replied, "I was a school teacher, ma'am, taught mathematics and science to children in Alabama." Mueller stared at him in shock. "You are educated. You teach mathematics?" "Yes, ma'am. Have a degree from Tuskegee Institute. Been teaching for 6 years before I was drafted." This revelation challenged another fundamental assumption. According to their previous education, people with dark skin were supposedly intellectually inferior and incapable of advanced learning. Yet here was a man who not only possessed formal education, but had dedicated his life to teaching others. Word of Williams's background spread quickly among the prisoners. Soon, German women were seeking out conversations with all the African-American guards, eager to learn about their backgrounds, education, and experiences. What they discovered contradicted everything they had been taught about racial hierarchy and intellectual capacity. Sergeant Washington found himself in the extraordinary position of conducting informal seminars about American society, African-American history, and the reality of racial relations in the United States. The German women listened with intense focus, taking notes and asking detailed questions about everything from educational opportunities to cultural achievements. "Sergeant Washington," Dr. Weber asked during one of these sessions, "if your people are capable of education and military service, why were we taught otherwise?" Washington considered his response carefully. "Perhaps someone wanted you to believe that some people were less than human, so you wouldn't question treating them badly." The psychological impact of these revelations was profound and immediate. Greta Hoffman, the communications specialist who had first questioned the nature of dark skin, began to experience what she would later describe as a complete restructuring of her understanding of reality. "If they lied to us about this," Hoffman confided to her closest friend among the prisoners, "what else did they lie to us about?" The question haunted many of the German women as they began to reconsider everything they had been taught. The evidence before their eyes contradicted fundamental assumptions about human nature, racial characteristics, and social hierarchy. The careful, systematic indoctrination of years was crumbling under the weight of direct human contact. Private King from Chicago became particularly close with several of the German women who were struggling with these revelations. His patient explanations about African American communities, achievements and contributions to American society provided a completely different perspective on human diversity and capability. In Chicago, King explained to a group of fascinated listeners, "My neighborhood has black doctors, teachers, business owners, musicians, and artists. People of all colors work together, learn together, and build communities together." This description of integrated society was as foreign to the German women as descriptions of life on another planet. Their previous worldview had no framework for understanding voluntary cooperation between different racial groups. The transformation was not uniform among all the prisoners. Some of the older women, more deeply indoctrinated and less flexible in their thinking, struggled to accept the evidence before their eyes. They developed elaborate theories to explain away what they were observing, clinging to familiar beliefs, even when those beliefs were demonstrably false. But among the younger women, especially those with technical or scientific training, the impact was revolutionary. They began to apply the same questioning approach to other aspects of their education and beliefs. If their understanding of human biology had been incorrect, what about their beliefs regarding politics, history, and social organization? Dr. Weber emerged as the leader of this intellectual awakening. Her scientific background gave her the tools to systematically examine and test the beliefs she had previously accepted without question. She began conducting informal seminars for her fellow prisoners, teaching them to apply critical thinking to their previous education. "We must examine everything we believed," Weber announced during one of these sessions. "If we accepted falsehoods about something as basic as human appearance, we must question all of our assumptions about the world." The American camp administrators watched this transformation with fascination and concern. Lieutenant Thompson documented the process in detailed reports that would later become required reading for military personnel dealing with prisoner re-education programs. "These women are essentially reprogramming themselves," Thompson wrote in her daily report. "Direct contact with American soldiers of different races is accomplishing what months of formal re-education programs could never achieve." Captain Hayes recognized the historical significance of what was unfolding in his camp. He authorized extended interaction periods between the guards and prisoners, creating opportunities for continued dialogue and cultural exchange. The camp became an unofficial laboratory for studying how direct human contact could break down years of systematic indoctrination. As weeks passed, the German women began to share stories about their own backgrounds and experiences during the conflict. Many revealed that they had never encountered people of different races before their capture, making their current situation a completely unprecedented experience. Maria Schneider described her shock at learning that the American military was racially integrated at the unit level. "In our military," she explained, "different groups were always kept separate. We were taught this was natural and necessary, but here you work together as if it is completely normal." Sergeant Washington explained the reality of American military integration, including the challenges and progress that had been made. His honest discussion of ongoing racial problems in American society impressed the German women with its complexity and nuance. "We still have problems," Washington admitted. "America is not perfect when it comes to race, but we are working to make things better, and we believe that all people deserve equal treatment and opportunity." This acknowledgement of imperfection, combined with a commitment to improvement, provided a completely different model for thinking about social problems than the rigid ideological certainties the women had previously known. The intellectual awakening spread beyond questions of race to broader issues of propaganda, authority, and independent thinking. The German women began to discuss how they had accepted information without questioning its sources or testing its accuracy against their own observations. Anna Mueller reflected on her experience during a conversation with Corporal Butler. "We were taught to trust authority completely and never to question what we were told. Now I realize that this made us vulnerable to accepting falsehoods as truth." Butler nodded thoughtfully. "That's why education should teach people how to think, not just what to think. This distinction between process and content became central to the intellectual transformation taking place among the prisoners." They began to value critical thinking skills over memorized facts and to question the methods by which they had acquired their beliefs. The camp's library became an unexpected center of activity as the German women sought out books about American history, society, and culture. They read voraciously, eager to understand the context that had produced the reality they were experiencing daily through their interactions with their guards. Dr. Weber discovered books about African American achievements in science, education, and the arts that completely contradicted everything she had been taught about intellectual capability and cultural contribution. She shared these discoveries with her fellow prisoners, creating a ripple effect of revelation and reconsideration. "Listen to this," Weber read aloud from a biography of George Washington Carver. "This man was born into slavery, but became one of America's greatest agricultural scientists. He developed hundreds of uses for crops and revolutionized farming in the American South." The German women listened in amazement as Weber described Carver's achievements, innovations, and contributions to human knowledge. The existence of such accomplishments challenged their fundamental assumptions about human potential and racial hierarchy. Private Williams became an unofficial cultural ambassador, sharing stories about African American communities, traditions, and achievements that painted a rich picture of human diversity and creativity. His descriptions of music, literature, and cultural innovation fascinated the German women who had been taught that cultural achievement was limited to specific racial groups. "Music is universal," Williams explained during one of his impromptu cultural presentations. "Every human community creates music, tells stories, and develops art. The forms might be different, but the creative impulse is the same everywhere." These discussions about universal human characteristics gradually replaced the previous focus on differences and hierarchies with an appreciation for shared humanity and diverse expression. The German women began to understand culture and achievement as products of opportunity and circumstance rather than racial destiny. The transformation process was not without emotional challenges. Many of the women experienced what psychologists would later recognize as cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort that occurs when strongly held beliefs are contradicted by clear evidence. Some struggled with depression as they realized the extent to which their worldview had been based on falsehoods. Greta Hoffmann experienced a particularly difficult period as she grappled with the implications of her discoveries. "I feel as though my entire education was a lie," she confided to Dr. Weber during a moment of despair. "How can I trust anything I thought I knew?" Weber, drawing on her scientific training, helped her fellow prisoners work through these psychological challenges by teaching them to approach knowledge acquisition systematically and critically. "We can learn to evaluate information more carefully," Weber counseled. "This experience has taught us to demand evidence for claims and to test beliefs against observable reality." The German women also began to discuss the broader implications of their experiences for understanding propaganda, authority, and social control. They realized that their previous education had been designed not to inform them, but to control their thoughts and actions. "We were not educated," Maria Schneider observed during one of their evening discussions. "We were programmed. True education teaches you to think independently and question authority when necessary." This insight led to deeper conversations about the nature of freedom, democracy, and individual responsibility. The American Guards shared their own understanding of democratic principles and individual rights, providing the German women with alternative models for organizing society and government. Sergeant Washington explained the concept of constitutional rights and limited government in terms that resonated with the women's new appreciation for independent thinking. "In a free society," Washington said, "the government serves the people, not the other way around. And people have the right to question their leaders and demand accountability." These political discussions complemented the personal revelations about race and human nature, creating a comprehensive transformation in the women's understanding of social organization and human potential. They began to envision alternative approaches to governance that prioritized individual dignity and collective welfare over ideological purity and authoritarian control. As summer progressed, The relationships between the German prisoners and their American guards evolved from suspicious curiosity to genuine friendship and mutual respect. The guards found themselves learning about German culture, history, and personal experiences while sharing their own backgrounds and perspectives. Corporal Butler developed a particularly close friendship with Dr. Weber, who appreciated his intelligence and willingness to engage in serious discussions about complex topics. Their conversations ranged from scientific subjects to philosophy and social theory, demonstrating the intellectual equality that their previous worldviews had insisted was impossible. "Corporal Butler," Weber said during one of their regular discussions, "you have taught me more about human nature in these few months than 12 years of previous education ever did." Butler smiled. "Sometimes the best way to learn about people is to actually get to know them as individuals rather than as representatives of groups." This emphasis on individual relationships over group categories became central to the transformation process. The German women learned to see their guards as unique individuals with their own personalities, interests, and contributions, rather than as representatives of racial categories. The friendships that developed challenged not only racial assumptions, but also military and national boundaries. Despite the fact that these relationships existed within the context of captivity and recent conflict, genuine human connections transcended the artificial divisions created by politics and propaganda. Private King formed a friendship with Anna Möller based on their shared interest in mechanical engineering. Möller had worked with radio equipment and was fascinated by King's knowledge of automotive technology. Their technical discussions demonstrated how professional competence and intellectual curiosity could bridge any cultural or racial divide. "It is remarkable," Möller observed, "how much we have in common despite coming from completely different backgrounds and countries." King nodded. "People are more alike than they are different, once you get past the surface differences and really get to know someone." As autumn approached, the German women faced the reality that their captivity would eventually end, and they would return to a Germany that was being rebuilt from the devastation of conflict. The question of how to apply their newfound understanding in their future lives became increasingly important. Dr. Weber organized discussion groups focused on practical applications of their intellectual transformation. "We cannot simply return to our old lives and pretend this experience never happened," she argued. "We have a responsibility to share what we have learned and to help others overcome the same misconceptions that we once held." The women began to develop plans for continuing their education, pursuing careers that would allow them to contribute to the reconstruction of their society, and working to promote understanding between different groups of people. Many expressed interest in becoming teachers, social workers, or community leaders who could help rebuild Germany on more enlightened foundations. Greta Hoffmann decided to pursue advanced studies in communications technology, inspired by her interactions with the American technical personnel. "I want to use technology to connect people rather than to divide them," she explained. "Communication can break down barriers and build understanding between different communities." Maria Schneider planned to become a nurse, motivated by her desire to help people regardless of their background or nationality. "Healing is universal," she said. "When someone is sick or injured, their race or nationality does not matter. Everyone deserves care and compassion." These career aspirations reflected the women's commitment to applying their new understanding of human equality and dignity in practical ways. They wanted to use their skills and education to build a better society based on mutual respect and cooperation, rather than division and conflict. The American camp administrators recognized the significance of the transformation they had witnessed and began documenting the process for future reference. The informal educational program that had emerged from spontaneous interactions between guards and prisoners became a model for prisoner re-education efforts in other facilities. Lieutenant Thompson compiled detailed case studies of individual transformations, noting the factors that contributed to successful attitude change and the methods that proved most effective for overcoming deeply ingrained prejudices. Her work would later influence military and civilian programs designed to promote intercultural understanding and combat racism. The key factor, Thompson wrote in her final report, was direct, personal contact between individuals from different backgrounds, under conditions that allowed for extended interaction and genuine relationship building. Formal lectures and educational programs could never have achieved what spontaneous human friendship accomplished naturally. Captain Hayes ensured that the lessons learned at Camp Shanks were shared with other military installations dealing with prisoner populations. The success of the informal cultural exchange program led to the development of structured interaction programs at other facilities, though none quite replicated the unique circumstances that had made the Camp Shanks experience so transformative. As winter approached and preparations began for the eventual repatriation of the German women, the relationships that had developed between prisoners and guards faced the reality of permanent separation. The friendships that had transcended national and racial boundaries would soon be tested by distance and the different paths their lives would take. Dr. Weber organized a farewell ceremony that honored the mutual learning and growth that had taken place during their months together. Both the German women and their American guards participated in presentations about what they had learned from each other and how the experience had changed their perspectives on human nature and social relations. "We came here as enemies," Weber said during her presentation, "but we leave as friends who understand that the divisions between people are artificial and can be overcome through genuine human contact and mutual respect." Sergeant Washington responded on behalf of the guards, expressing his own appreciation for what had been a transformative experience. "You have taught us that people can change, that education and open minds can overcome even the most deeply ingrained prejudices. You have shown us the power of friendship to heal the wounds created by conflict and misunderstanding." The exchange of addresses and promises to maintain correspondence reflected the genuine bonds that had formed, despite the unusual circumstances of their meeting. Many of these relationships would indeed continue long after the formal end of their military association. Corporal Butler and Dr. Weber maintained a regular correspondence that continued for decades, sharing information about their careers, families, and efforts to promote racial understanding in their respective communities. Their friendship became a personal testament to the power of individual relationships to transcend historical divisions. Private Williams and Maria Schneider exchanged letters about their work in education and healthcare, supporting each other's efforts to apply the lessons they had learned about human equality and dignity in their professional lives. Their correspondence documented the practical impact of their transformed understanding on their daily work and community involvement. The departure of the German women from Camp Shanks marked the end of an extraordinary experiment in human relations, but the impact of their experience continued to ripple outward as they returned to their civilian lives and began implementing their new understanding of human nature and social organization. Dr. Weber returned to Germany and eventually became a professor of biology at a university in Munich, where she made the study of human genetics and the debunking of racial pseudoscience central to her curriculum. Her courses on human diversity and evolution became popular among students eager to understand the scientific basis for human equality. "My students learn not just the facts about human biology," Weber would later explain, "but also how to think critically about claims regarding human differences and to recognize the political motivations behind pseudoscientific theories." Her textbook on human genetics, published in the 1950s, became a standard reference that explicitly addressed the fallacies of racial science and provided clear, factual information about human biological diversity. The book's dedication read, "To my American friends who taught me that education means learning to see clearly rather than believing blindly." Greta Hoffman established a successful career in telecommunications engineering and became an advocate for international communication and cultural exchange. She worked on projects that connected different countries and communities, always keeping in mind her belief that communication technology could break down barriers between people. "Every time I work on a new communication system," Hoffman reflected, "I think about how it might help people from different backgrounds understand each other better. Technology should serve human understanding, not create new divisions." Her company became known for its commitment to hiring people from diverse backgrounds and for its support of international educational exchanges. Hoffman established scholarship programs that enabled young people from different countries to study abroad and experience firsthand the value of intercultural friendship. Maria Schneider became a nursing administrator who specialized in developing healthcare programs for underserved communities. Her work focused on ensuring that medical care was available to all people, regardless of their background, nationality, or economic status. Healthcare is a human right, Ms. Schneider would often say, echoing the lessons about human equality that she had learned during her captivity. When we see suffering, we must respond with compassion, not judgment about whether someone deserves our help. Her hospitals became models for inclusive healthcare that served diverse communities with equal dedication and respect. Schneider trained nursing staff to recognize and overcome their own biases while providing care that honored the dignity of every patient. Anna Meller returned to her work in radio technology, but focused her efforts on developing communication systems for educational and cultural programming rather than military applications. She believed that radio and television could be powerful tools for promoting understanding between different groups of people. Mass communication can spread lies and hatred, Meller observed, but it can also share truth and build bridges between communities. We have a responsibility to use these tools wisely. Her production company created educational programs about different cultures and communities, always emphasizing shared human values and common aspirations. Mueller's documentaries about intercultural friendship and cooperation won numerous awards and influenced public attitudes toward diversity and inclusion. The American Guards who had participated in this extraordinary experience also carried its lessons into their post-military lives. Many became educators, community leaders, and advocates for racial equality who drew on their experience at Camp Shanks to support their work. Sergeant Washington used his military leadership experience to establish educational programs for young people in his home community of Philadelphia. His youth organization focused on developing critical thinking skills and promoting understanding between different racial and ethnic groups. These young people need to learn how to think for themselves, Washington explained, and they need to understand that human worth is not determined by skin color or background, but by character and contribution. His programs became models for community-based education that combined academic learning with practical experience in intercultural cooperation and mutual respect. Washington's approach emphasized personal relationships and direct contact as the most effective methods for overcoming prejudice and building understanding. Corporal Butler completed his education after military service and became a high school principal in Detroit, where he implemented innovative programs that brought together students from different backgrounds for collaborative learning experiences. His educational philosophy was deeply influenced by his experience with the German prisoners. The best way to fight prejudice, Butler would tell his faculty, is to create opportunities for young people to work together on meaningful projects where they can discover their common interests and mutual capabilities. His school became known for its success in promoting academic achievement among all students while building strong relationships across racial and ethnic lines. Butler's approach demonstrated that the lessons learned at Camp Shanks could be effectively applied in civilian educational settings. Private Williams returned to teaching, but expanded his focus to include international education and cultural exchange. He developed pen pal programs that connected his students with young people in Germany and other countries, fostering the kind of personal relationships that had proven so transformative in his own experience. "My students learn that people everywhere share the same hopes and dreams," Williams explained. "When young people communicate directly with each other, they discover that the differences between countries and cultures are much less important than their shared humanity." His classroom became a laboratory for international friendship, with students regularly corresponding with peers around the world and sharing their experiences with cultural diversity and common human values. Private King used his technical skills to establish a successful automotive repair business that became known for its commitment to serving all customers with equal respect and quality service. His shop became an informal community center where people from different backgrounds gathered to discuss current events and social issues. "Business gives you a chance to treat people fairly every day," King observed. "When you provide good service to everyone regardless of who they are, You are demonstrating your belief in human equality in practical terms. His business practices reflected the lessons about human dignity and equal treatment that had emerged from his friendships with the German prisoners. King's shop became a model for how commercial enterprises could contribute to building inclusive communities. The story of Camp Shanks became legendary within military circles and eventually found its way into academic studies of prisoner rehabilitation and racial attitude change. Researchers studied the informal educational process that had emerged from spontaneous interactions, identifying factors that contributed to successful transformation of deeply held beliefs. The key elements that made the Camp Shanks experience so successful were identified as extended personal contact under non-threatening conditions, opportunities for genuine dialogue and relationship building, and the presence of educated individuals who were capable of applying critical thinking skills to their own beliefs and assumptions. These findings influenced the development of formal programs designed to promote intercultural understanding and combat prejudice in military, educational, and civilian settings. The Camp Shanks model demonstrated that attitude change was most effective when it emerged from authentic human relationships rather than imposed educational requirements. Lieutenant Thompson's detailed documentation of the transformation process became required reading at military academies and was incorporated into training programs for personnel dealing with diverse populations. Her work demonstrated the practical value of promoting positive intercultural contact as a method for building unity and understanding within military units. The psychological insights gained from the Camp Shanks experience also contributed to civilian research on prejudice reduction and attitude change. Social psychologists recognized that the informal experiment had provided valuable data about the conditions necessary for overcoming deeply ingrained biases through interpersonal contact. The success of the program led to recommendations that similar opportunities be created in civilian settings, particularly in educational institutions where young people could benefit from positive intercultural experiences before their attitudes became fixed through limited exposure to diversity. Years later, as civil rights movements gained momentum in the United States and democratic reconstruction proceeded in Germany, many of the individuals who had participated in the Camp Shanks experience found themselves in positions where they could apply the lessons they had learned about human equality and the power of direct personal contact to break down barriers. Dr. Weber's scientific work on human genetics provided factual ammunition for civil rights advocates who sought to debunk racial pseudoscience and establish the biological basis for human equality. Her research was cited in court cases and policy debates where scientific evidence about human diversity was needed to support arguments for equal treatment. Greta Hoffmann's communication technologies facilitated international exchanges that brought people from different countries and cultures together for collaborative projects and mutual learning. Her work demonstrated how technology could serve human understanding rather than merely commercial or military purposes. The nursing programs developed by Maria Schneider became models for healthcare equity that influenced medical education and hospital policies throughout Europe. Her work showed how professional training could incorporate lessons about human dignity and equal treatment into practical service delivery. Anna Mueller's media productions reached millions of viewers with messages about intercultural friendship and cooperation. Her documentaries provided counter-narratives to prejudice and hatred, offering audiences examples of successful relationships between people from different backgrounds. The educational innovations implemented by the American Guards influenced teaching methods and curriculum development in schools throughout the United States. Their approaches to promoting critical thinking and intercultural understanding became standard practices in many educational institutions. Sergeant Washington's youth programs demonstrated how community organizations could create opportunities for positive intercultural contact that would prevent the development of prejudice and promote cooperation between different groups. The business practices developed by Private King showed how commercial enterprises could contribute to building inclusive communities while maintaining successful operations. His model influenced other business owners who wanted to demonstrate their commitment to equality through their daily practices. The correspondence networks established by Private Williams created lasting connections between individuals in different countries who continued to learn from each other and share their experiences with cultural diversity and international friendship. As the decades passed, the participants in the Camp Shanks experience often reflected on how a chance encounter during wartime had fundamentally changed their understanding of human nature and social relations. The transformation that began with German women trying to rub black paint off American soldiers had rippled outward to influence countless other lives and contribute to broader social changes. The story became a testament to the power of human contact to overcome even the most systematic indoctrination and the most deeply ingrained prejudices. It demonstrated that genuine education could emerge from unexpected circumstances and that authentic relationships could transcend artificial divisions created by politics and propaganda. For the German women who had experienced this transformation, the memory of their time at Camp Shanks remained a touchstone for their commitment to human equality and intercultural understanding. They often spoke of how their American guards had taught them to see clearly rather than believe blindly, and how this lesson had shaped every aspect of their subsequent lives. For the American guards who had participated in this extraordinary experience, the relationships they had built with their former enemies became proof that people could change and that friendship could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. Their experience provided them with confidence that social barriers could be overcome through patience, understanding, and genuine human contact. The children and grandchildren of both groups inherited stories about a time when people from different countries and races had discovered their common humanity through direct personal relationship. These family narratives contributed to broader cultural changes that promoted tolerance, understanding, and cooperation between diverse communities. Educational institutions around the world began incorporating the lessons learned at Camp Shanks into their curricula, teaching students about the importance of direct experience in overcoming prejudice and the value of critical thinking in evaluating claims about human differences. The story became a case study in successful attitude change and intercultural education. Research programs focusing on prejudice reduction and conflict resolution drew on the Camp Shanks experience to develop more effective methods for promoting understanding between groups in conflict. The informal experiment had provided valuable insights about the conditions necessary for successful reconciliation and attitude transformation. International exchange programs used the Camp Shanks model to design experiences that would maximize the potential for positive intercultural contact and genuine relationship building. The emphasis on extended personal interaction under non-threatening conditions became a standard feature of successful exchange programs. Military training programs incorporated lessons about the importance of treating all personnel with respect and dignity, regardless of their background or nationality. The Camp Shanks experience demonstrated that inclusive practices could enhance unit cohesion and operational effectiveness. Healthcare education adopted teaching methods that emphasized the universal nature of human suffering and the importance of providing care with equal compassion and competence to all patients. Medical schools used the Camp Shanks story to illustrate how personal biases could interfere with professional effectiveness. Business schools included case studies about the economic benefits of inclusive practices and the importance of treating all customers and employees with equal respect. The commercial success of businesses that adopted inclusive practices provided practical evidence for the value of equality in economic terms. Community organizations developed programs that created opportunities for positive intercultural contact, similar to what had occurred spontaneously at Camp Shanks. These programs focused on building genuine relationships between people from different backgrounds through collaborative activities and shared experiences. Religious institutions used the Camp Shanks story to illustrate the universal nature of human dignity and the importance of treating all people as children of God, regardless of their race, nationality, or background. The story became a powerful example of how spiritual principles could overcome artificial divisions between people. Political leaders drew on the Camp Shanks experience to support arguments for inclusive policies and equal treatment under the law. The transformation of the German women provided evidence that people could change their attitudes and that society could overcome historical divisions through commitment to equality and justice. As the 20th century progressed and new challenges emerged in international relations and domestic social policy, the lessons learned at Camp Shanks remained relevant for addressing contemporary issues. The story provided a framework for understanding how direct personal contact could build bridges between communities in conflict. Immigration debates were influenced by arguments that drew on the Camp Shanks experience to demonstrate how people from different backgrounds could successfully integrate into new communities when given opportunities for positive contact and genuine relationship building. Educational integration efforts used the Camp Shanks model to design programs that would promote understanding between students from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. The emphasis on collaborative learning and shared experiences became standard practice in successful integration programs. International diplomacy incorporated lessons about the importance of people-to-people contacts in building understanding between nations. Cultural exchange programs were designed to create opportunities for the kind of personal relationships that had proven so transformative at Camp Shanks. Conflict resolution programs in various settings applied the insights gained from the Camp Shanks experience to develop more effective methods for overcoming hostility and building cooperation between groups with histories of conflict. The emphasis on direct contact and genuine dialogue became central to successful reconciliation efforts. The legacy of Camp Shanks continued to influence new generations of educators, community leaders, and policymakers who sought to build more inclusive societies based on mutual respect and understanding. The story provided both inspiration and practical guidance for those working to overcome prejudice and promote equality. Universities established research centers focused on intercultural relations that drew on the Camp Shanks experience as a foundational case study in successful attitude change. These centers developed new theories and methods for promoting understanding between diverse groups. Museums created exhibits that told the story of Camp Shanks as an example of how ordinary people could overcome extraordinary prejudices through direct human contact. These exhibits educated visitors about the history of racial attitudes and the possibility of positive change through personal relationship. Documentary filmmakers produced movies about the Camp Shanks experience that reached broad audiences with messages about the power of friendship to transcend artificial divisions. These films contributed to popular understanding of the importance of intercultural contact in building inclusive societies. Authors wrote books that explored the psychological and social dynamics that had made the Camp Shanks transformation possible. These publications provided detailed analysis of the factors that contributed to successful attitude change and practical guidance for replicating similar results in other settings. The participants themselves, as they aged, became sought-after speakers who shared their experiences with audiences around the world. Their personal testimonies provided powerful evidence for the possibility of overcoming even deeply ingrained prejudices through genuine human relationship. Dr. Weber, in particular, became an internationally recognized expert on the relationship between scientific education and social prejudice. Her speeches and writings influenced educational policy in multiple countries and contributed to the development of more effective methods for teaching about human diversity. Greta Hoffmann's work in telecommunications was recognized with numerous awards for its contribution to international communication and understanding. Her innovations in communication technology were explicitly designed to promote positive contact between people from different backgrounds. As the 21st century began, the story of Camp Shanks remained relevant for addressing new challenges related to globalization, immigration, and cultural diversity. The fundamental lessons about human nature and the power of personal relationship to overcome prejudice continued to apply to contemporary social issues. Technology companies drew on the Camp Shanks model to develop online platforms that would facilitate positive intercultural contact and genuine relationship building between people from different countries and backgrounds. The emphasis on authentic human connection influenced the design of social networking and communication technologies. Educational institutions adapted the Camp Shanks approach to create virtual exchange programs that could provide opportunities for intercultural learning even when physical travel was not possible. These programs maintained the emphasis on personal relationship and direct contact while using technology to overcome geographical barriers. International development organizations applied lessons from Camp Shanks to their work in promoting understanding between different ethnic and religious groups in post-conflict societies. The emphasis on creating opportunities for positive contact under non-threatening conditions became standard practice in reconciliation efforts. Corporate training programs used the Camp Shanks story to teach employees about the importance of inclusive workplace practices and the business benefits of diversity. The transformation of the German women provided a compelling example of how people could overcome their biases through positive workplace relationships. The story of the German women who tried to rub the black paint off American soldiers became more than just a historical anecdote. It became a symbol of the human capacity for growth, the power of education over indoctrination, and the possibility of building understanding between people from completely different backgrounds. The lessons learned at Camp Shanks demonstrated that no prejudice was so deeply ingrained that it could not be overcome through direct human contact and genuine relationship building. The transformation of the German women from confused captives to advocates for human equality showed that people could change their fundamental beliefs when presented with clear evidence and opportunities for authentic relationship. The American Guards who participated in this extraordinary experience learned that their own humanity was enhanced when they treated others with respect and dignity. Their willingness to engage in genuine dialogue and relationship building created the conditions necessary for transformation and mutual understanding. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.